And now, here's your host, Alessandra Torresani.
It's been a minute, David. It's been a minute.
Oh, look at how shiny my forehead is.
But you're looking gorgeous. We are here in a top secret government building, and you have microscopes in the background mapping things out. It's just wild and crazy and fun, and I wouldn't expect anything less from super dad David Haggerty. I like super dad. That's a new name for you. I mean, I like go with that.
I don't know about that. I'm shaking my head. I'm doing physical movements on an audio podcast again.
Once again, still hasn't learned.
I'll never learn. That's called resilience, folks.
The real question is, how are you really?
How am I really? I'm okay. I think that I'm running into at full speed the conundrum that modern parents with careers face, such that you can't be everywhere all at once.
Sure.
Like I am for the interim, sort of my emotional and psychological self is attached to my physical self.
Right.
So like I feel the need to be at work and do stuff, and like I have a team of people that work under me, and I need to be a good boss and a good mentor, and then I have to leave and go home and be a dad and be a good partner and like do all that stuff. And then it's just like I wake up every day, life goes by at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and then like at the end of the day I'm like, woo. And then you go to sleep, and like on a day-to-day things are like stressful and like, you know, like all of the things. But like if I zoom out a little bit, like I'm great. Like I have nothing to complain about.
Right.
I have a healthy child. I have a good relationship. I'm enjoying this role and being a team lead and like all this stuff. Like I have nothing to objectively complain about other than the monotony of life.
Well, no, I know, but I think that is, like, it is a lot.
But I don't know, like my mental health is good, like in a very general sense, because like this is what we're going to go like super heady and meta just directly, from the get-go, just jump into it. I don't know how to describe my mental health being good. I have a lot of experience and a lot of detailed vocabulary to describe to people in like extreme complexity how I am doing when things are bad. Mm-hmm. Like you build that muscle. Sure. Like if you're somebody who has a mental health problem or a diagnosis, yada, whatever, like you get really, really good at describing what it's like to feel bad in acute ways, to try and to validate to people, to destigmatize, like all this stuff. Mm-hmm. You spend a lot of time doing that. I have no vocabulary to describe how I am doing when like things are fine. I just don't know. The other side of that, I have no idea how to talk about it. Like things are great. Like whoop-de-doo. Like I don't know. Like I run out of words.
I don't think that you would even have to say that things are in quote unquote great. I think that things are at a place where it's unbalanced, right? Where it's balanced. That's what I'm saying. Sorry, not unbalanced, like, where it's balanced. But it's not that it's like everything is amazing and it's great. It's like, you know what? You're on like, it's like you're almost like you're on a conveyor belt right now, and like you're just going, and like there's nothing like bad that's like taking you off the conveyor belt. There's nothing that's like, oh my God, like it's like let's use the example. It's like you're Mr. Potato Head. And I say this because I just got this for a lady for Christmas. So I'm like rolling into Mr. Potato Head again. But it's like, you know, like all your pieces are on. Like the kid hasn't come and like taken your eyeballs off or like ripped a leg off or an arm off, you know. It's like you're doing good. But like at the same time, you're still a plastic toy that's like just trying to get through life. So like it's not awesome. Like but at the same time, like someone's not cooking you and eating you, you know? Is this like a little weird? Is it a little bizarre? I'm just really on the Mr. Potato Head kick right now.
No, it's fine. It's fine. We can stick with it. I just like I've been noticing lately that like you look at the world of mental health vocabulary,
Yeah.
content, influence, whatever. And it's like my personal trajectory has been like I was really sick for a chronic but acute part of my life.
Right.
I did a lot of work. I've been in therapy for the last decade. I've taken drugs. I've done this. I've done that. Like I've done all the stuff.
You've done the
Like
steps.
you like
Sure.
reach out into the world and you're like, what should I do when I feel this way? And I've consumed all there is to consume.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked through these things. I continue to work on them. I feel like I've gone from A to B.
Mm.
Like I feel like someone should give me like I have completed the quest.
The
Like I
course.
get an award. I've done the
Sure.
thing. Like you know what I mean? Like life is
And
not
now what?
over. But like
But now
I
what?
completed this part of the educational span and timeline. I learned a bunch about myself. I learned how to take care of myself. I learned like all these things. And I don't feel from a sociological standpoint that I am sick anymore, quote unquote. But like I've run that rat race. I've gotten to the end of it. There are parts where, you know, it wavers now. Like you dip back in, you come back up, like things are bad, things are good, but like it doesn't feel pathological or like illness or like any of this stuff anymore. And it requires maintenance, like all the things, all the details and ramifications that come with that. But like I got so good at talking about myself and working through that feeling and emotion and describing to people and like going through all the motions and being like, oh, like my mental health is not good. And now I feel like I'm sort of out the other side on that. And it's like, I know how to talk about myself in the past and I know how to talk about feeling bad, but man, is it really hard for me to like sit down and be like, how am I doing right now?
Sure.
Like I just don't feel
Sure.
like it's a sort of like an air gap of
Oh,
like things are good and I don't want to disappoint people because they know me. So they knew what it was
right.
like to see David at his worst.
Right.
And now I feel like I'm obligated to describe to them that I'm not that person anymore and things are okay, but like also, even if things are a little bit bad, you shouldn't worry about me because it's not going to slip
Do you
back to
think
that.
that it's
Sure, to live inside my own head is running a marathon at full speed all the time. But
no, I don't mean that. I mean, like, do you think that because it's interesting, you and I are both in a very similar place where I don't feel ill, right? I don't feel
no,
like
yeah,
there's
no.
something wrong. But there are moments where I feel like, oh, I this is a familiar feeling. Oh, I know what this is, but I have
Mhm.
this tool that can work with me. And this actually it's a great way to start because it's something that I've been thinking about wanting to talk to you about. And this is a great segue.
Mhm.
But do you ever feel like it's your mind playing a trick on you where it's like, oh, haha, you think you're good, but I'm really like self-destructing you and you're gonna like explode inside your brain and like everything's gonna like unravel and it's gonna be crazy again? Or are you like, oh no, I'm healed? Like, right? Because they always tell you when you feel your best, right? With bipolar disorder specifically. Only gonna speak on that.
Yeah.
When you feel your best, it's usually when it's about to be a manic episode and like the end is near. Like, and
You
so
know,
I'm at that point and I'm like, what's this? What's the next surprise? Like, what's inside the next box?
I mean, like the answer is yes, but I can tell the difference now.
Yeah. Do
I
you think
used
it's
to
because we
not
have
be
to live for
able.
someone else now?
Well, I think that's a help, but I also think there's many people who have gone through what we go through, and having a tiny version of themselves does more harm than good. Do you know what I mean? Like
Interesting. Yeah.
we won that coin flip.
I think we totally won that coin flip. And I think also I find that well, we've talked about this before, that when I started my medication for my bipolar disorder, I was 21, 22 years old. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
very important part and time in your
Yeah,
life to
developmental.
carve a neural pathway.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know,
This is like my I remember when you told me that you were pregnant. We'd like spent a lot of time talking about you going off your meds and the stigma and like all that stuff and like people
yeah,
being worried and then a People magazine
sure.
article coming out and then people being like, what the fuck are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
yada, yada, yada. Like we ran that experiment
Yeah.
for all intents.
Sure.
They're completely fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
But
like,
why? But why? Do we know why?
well, I think because you do the other things in life besides pharmacological management of
I do
bipolar
the work.
disorder that make it
Sure.
so. And this isn't meant to be a comment being like these drugs are useless, but I
No.
think that, and they're very useful, but I think that you grow and you age and the disorder grows with you, and
Sure.
you develop new coping mechanisms that are probably a little bit healthier than the ones that you had in your early 20s and yada yada
Right.
yada and all this stuff. And it's like, man, you get out the other side of it, and you always sort of look over your shoulder being like, when is it going to come for me again? But the more and more that it doesn't show up, or the time between when things gets longer and longer, and you sort of just like get to this other side of like, I don't know, man, like my mental health isn't bad. I still deal with the same frustrating acute parts of being alive
Sure.
that everybody else does, and I'm angry and I'm happy and I'm sad and all the mixture and everything in between.
Sure.
But I just like feel like even when things are bad, I'm at peace in a way that I was never at peace before. In describing that to people who haven't gone through the thing we've gone through,
Right.
feels almost impossible.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there is no content, engagement, influence, social media posts, TikToks explaining any of what we're talking about. They're
But I
all
feel
stuck.
like there can't be,
They're all
right?
stuck. There can be now because we're consequently making a piece of media about it. But I do think that mental health literature, conversation, publications, academia, like all that stuff is so, I don't want to say stuck, but I want to say the focus mainly is start the conversation, destigmatize, talk to your doctor, like, and that's wildly needed. You know, like we're
Yeah.
missing a lot of people. They're falling through the cracks. Like we need to approach that there. But like, I feel like we need to start having the conversation of like, okay, guys, we're doing a good job. It's been 10 years of you know, in your face conversations about mental health. People are finally getting to the point, which I never thought I would see in my lifetime, just like voluntarily giving up drinking, giving up like doing things that hurt themselves, like
Sure.
finding new coping mechanisms that are happier and healthier for you. Like people are finally taking care of themselves in a way that is like culturally acceptable, that was like not a thing for hundreds of years.
You're talking
You know what I
in the
mean?
sense of like they're taking
It
care of
is
themselves,
cool and trendy
food
to like be
and
a healthy individual now.
wellness and
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Like, you know, like when you fast forward 50 years from now and they go back and they make a show the same way that we were 50 years ahead of them making Mad Men, it's going to like be people eating like kale and drinking smoothies. Whereas like when you looked at Mad Men, it was like misogyny and being drunk on the job all the time.
Right.
Like
What a good
we've
time.
entered that. But you know what I mean? Like we've entered a space where it's cool and trendy, and people are on board with being like, I'm going to prioritize my health. And like part of that comes, and it's been more of a lag, but like people are like on board with prioritizing their mental health too now. It's not just physical. It's not just body appearance. It's not just like the plastic surgery boom of the early 2000s. Like it's like people are on board now. And I feel like sometimes, like how I live my life sort of everywhere, like I've been ahead of that curve, and I feel like we're some of the first people to reach the other side and be like, man, it's really hard to describe to people who are stuck, not stuck, but like we're mentally 3 or 4 years behind where I am at in their engagement around mental health. Like this stuff that people are putting out, like I can say this because and I think you work with them too, but like was a student ambassador for the JED Foundation, work with the academics. Like their core messaging is just like start the conversation, engage around mental health. And that's not bad. It's totally needed, but I'm so far past that messaging doesn't land with me anymore. And like when people are only communicating through the language of what they're seeing on TikTok or social media, or like the current cultural expectations of like how we talk about mental health, I like feel like learning that language pulls me back in time and like doesn't actually represent how I'm feeling. So like now that we've like really pulled the thread out on the question of like how are you really doing, like I feel like the lack of language that I have around it is sort of a product of how we've socialized speaking about mental health, creating content about it, like whatever.
Yeah. What I think
and it's like ironic to be on a podcast talking about mental health, doing it, and then like shitting the very thing that I'm talking about.
I would
like,
think is very interesting
but
that you talk
it's
about
interesting
the
to me,
younger generation, right? And how we're saying how, oh, it's about starting the conversation and whatnot. I have to be honest, like I have cousins. I have a very big family, right? And no siblings, but like very big cousins and age range, you know, and they are from mid-20s, I would say late 20s, early 30s, all the way down to like 6 or 7 years old, you know? And every generation, I will say, like from the youngest to the oldest, they all talk about mental health. It's not a weird thing. It's very conversational. It's not strange. They talk about sexuality. They talk about, you know, everything. Where like, I don't mean sexuality like, oh, they talk about like, ooh, we're having sex. Like, no, there's open dialogue about transgender. There's open dialogue about
identity,
gay, bi, identity, all that. And I feel like what these organizations, right, and what people are kind of missing is the how are you really conversation, the let's start the conversation about mental health really needs to be the generation above us and above beyond, right?
Because all this stuff is like supposed to be targeted at young people, and I'm like, you're wasting your dollars. They're already doing it.
They don't need it because it is so natural to them. It is like, how are you doing? It's like such a easy conversation to have, and it's great, and that's what's so amazing. But it's like when we're trying to talk to, you know, parents or grandparents or colleagues that are older about mental health, and they're like, are you okay? Oh, we don't talk about that. You know, that is where I feel like things need to be. I
feel sandwiched in between those two generations, though. Like,
well, I think I'm going to speak for all millennials. I think millennials are so fucked on so many levels. Well, we have been through so much.
No, but I get it. And it's like weird now in like a sense of like, I feel sandwiched between those two generations.
Yeah.
And I think it's easier to talk to like, the like beautiful thing about being a scientist is like the majority of the workforce that does science is just like really, really young, super intelligent kids.
Right.
Like these kids are brilliant. They're doing, you know, PhD thesis in physics and math at like age 17.
But don't you sometimes feel like you don't know what the world is? You haven't lived?
Yeah, no. But it's fun to have the brain that I do and empower these people to develop into more than just STEM talent.
Sure.
You know, like science, technology, math, like to become people and like learn the soft skills of real life, not just like, can you know, do a triple integral without a calculator kind of nonsense.
Wow.
But like, it's easier for me to talk to them because they already have this baked into their generation. Where like I'm their manager and like, yeah, they look up at me and they're like, ew, who's that old man? But like also like I feel like I can connect with them in a way that when I think back to the people that mentored me, they were unable to do so. And I feel this responsibility to like not make mental health or diversity, equity, inclusion, or like all the other politicized like nonsense about the reality that we live in right now part of my mentorship style that seems politicized or like, you know, like artificially implemented because that's what's in vogue right now. But rather like those conversations are the easiest conversations to have with the next generation. And like, I think some of that is because of the let's start the conversation and like, you know, like that. But like where it's clearly working on the younger generation, it is not. working on the generation above us.
It's dividing. It's dividing,
And to be sandwiched in the middle of it, you sort of have to choose where you're going to apply your time and expertise and intelligence and like all this sort of stuff. And like the clear as day choice that I've made is just sort of like, I don't have the time, effort, or energy to manage up. Like I'm going to focus on the people that I'm interested in mentoring and building careers with and helping those people up and achieve all the things they want to. And like, my hope is that we essentially just replace in the workforce and the political system and they got to go. They've been given the chance to amend their views and they haven't. So like, what am I supposed to do?
No, it kind of reminds me in a weird way. I mean, this is so like mom right now, but I've been meeting with a bunch of different preschools. Like she's not starting for like
2 years. Yeah. I love this. We should do the whole preschool thing on the podcast.
We could totally get into that. Like, let's do a total full episode on that. But this reminds me in the sense of, I've really been I've been drawn to the kind of Montessori program for preschools. I'm not saying that's what she's going to do, but like it's something that I've been very curious about on learning because it feels very structured. And I feel like I just did an interview with someone and we were talking about how there is so much freedom and structure and people think that structure is like a bad thing. And for me, like I thrive with structure. It's how I'm able to, keep my mental illness at bay. I see that my daughter thrives with structure, like Lady thrives with that, and becomes a better version of herself with it, and I do as well. So I think there's just certain minds that I think are better at that, like that find peace at that. And then there's kids that find peace at free play, which is amazing as well. But I'm just trying to figure it all out. But what I think what's really cool about the Montessori is that, these kids will grow and they're all in the same class and they're all within like 3 to 4 or 5 age difference, with each other. I think it's like 3 to 4 years. And it's like, at first the babies go in there and they learn from the older kids. And like Lady has a lot of friends who have siblings that are a little bit older and she like craves that attention. She craves like learning from the big kids. She wants to hang out with the big kids and is like, oh my gosh, like let's go do this. Whoa, look at what they're doing. This is awesome, and growing. And then the older kids in Montessori then end up being the teachers and they end up teaching, like not, there are teachers, but I mean like they end up teaching the little ones.
They're responsible for learning your times tables.
Exactly. Yeah. But they end up teaching then the youngers. And so it's this like, full circle moment that they have at preschool. And I think that that's so cool because it's kind of what you're experiencing, right? Like, you went and you learned from an older generation and from your, bosses about, science and technology and math and like innovations. And like, here you are now where you're the boss, even though you're still in the grand scheme of things, David, like you're fucking young,
I'm a little itty baby.
You're a baby.
Starts with a 3 now though.
I know, but it's still a 3. Like it's not anything more than that, and you're still the baby, but here you are, acting as the teacher, but you are having the mindset of, I want to learn from them. Like and so I think it's very similar to that Montessori program where it's like the student becomes the teacher and then the teacher becomes the student. And it's like this whole circular like motion. And I think it's so cool because wow, like what you can teach these kids and what these kids are teaching you, like it's cool. I think it's a mindset that we need to be open to and we need to use in our everyday life, because age is nothing but a number, and we can take so much.
I'm gonna take a hard turn here.
Oh God,
the plane.
Okay.
There's this website that I follow that's like tech and like nerdy people news.
Sure.
It's like a blog for nerds about like, AMD and NVIDIA are releasing these new GPUs to do machine learning, like weird stuff. But they just ran a package where they're like, they do a big end of the year package every year about like some like technology meets cultural moment. And this year's is the death of Twitter.
Wow.
And they're like recapping like Twitter is no longer Twitter. It's X, whatever you want to say about Elon, whatever. But they're just like looking back at how the existence of Twitter and like putting your like thoughts and feelings into 280 characters of text, like online, shaped the way that we learn to communicate with each other. I think a lot of what I'm witnessing is, and I'm seeing it with myself too. And like I get to do this because part of my job is doing this. You know, like I get to write book chapters. I get to like write like really long form pieces of text, give long presentations, like do a lot of detail work. But like my wife works in PR. She writes copy and press releases and tweets and manages social media and like all this stuff. I had this conversation with her. I was like, oh my God, I think my thoughts are the lengths of tweets because I've just consumed things on Twitter for so long.
Wow.
Like, you know what I mean? Like you think in these like really short bites and then you move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Like algorithmic feeds, scrolling, really short computed bites of text that are opinions. We get to, I think Twitter was this place where you could send a tweet out about like a half-baked idea and then just get like a bunch of feedback instantly where people would be like, I hate you or you're super hot. And it was like never anywhere in between, but then you would just like up rank or down rank the responses that you wanted and like evolve your arguments. Like a new form of journalism, a new way that we think, a new way that we engage with others, a new way that we seek feedback or cause and effect relationships. Like it's all sort of a function of here is a text box and you can only put 280 characters into it.
Right.
And I finally deleted Twitter off my phone. I still tweet and like, it's like a weird place where like the best news and the best way to interact with scientists is actually on Twitter because we're all there. Wow. So like, there's like a weird work component of it that's still sort of implanted in my brain. But I'm starting to sort of realize in real time that like the way that we interact with each other and we talk about our feelings is in these bite-sized tweets. How are you really doing? It's a tweet.
It is. I've done it a lot.
And like, there's something about like unplugging and like figuring out how to reset your brain and be like, I think a reason why I'm coming back to this vocabulary issue of I don't know how to describe how I'm feeling to people because I have such this like large lived experience around bipolar disorder. And I have such what feels to me like a newfound perspective after, you know, a decade of going through this as a functioning adult. And like that explanation does not fit in that text box.
No. So
like, even if I knew what to say, I can't compress it into the form that people are comfortable.
Yeah.
And that is like the other layer to this of like, oh, I feel great is sometimes the easiest answer because it's the shortest one. It's the most digestible one, but it's not really representative of like how I'm actually doing and that complexity there. And just like people's brains and the way that we've come to normally communicate with each other are not programmed to hear the longer answer anymore.
No. And
it's like really tough to communicate this stuff. I remember when people used to write like long Tumblr posts.
Yes, I feel like I did. I had one called Geek of the Week, and I would pick like a celebrity and I would make him my Geek of the Week. Like, what the fuck?
No, but like I'm saying, like it's such a function, and it's like, you know, like people don't draw these lines. That's what I'm here to do. I'm here to just take two disparate ideas and connect them. But like, so much of mental health advocacy has taken place on the internet.
Yeah,
and to not talk about that concept in reverse of what impact has the internet had on how we talk about mental health, and not the other way around. Like, yes, it's a great delivery system. You're connected directly with your audience. if Twitter did not exist, if Instagram did not exist, these nonprofits and brands would never be able to put up tweets of being like, hey, like the Jet Foundation, for example,
Sure.
hey, we need to talk about mental health. We want to connect with students on college campuses across the United States. They spoke directly to their audience. I'm not saying these tools are a bad thing. They created a bunch of progress, and we wouldn't be where we are now without them. But now that one of these tools that was deeply impactful is sort of dying and dead, Twitter no longer exists. X will be something new in the future, yada, yada, yada. If you sort of look back and play the question in reverse of wait a minute, the way that we talked about these things, how we connected with our audiences were directly shaped by some guy in an office in San Francisco being hey, I think that we should raise the character limit to 280, and being that has wild health and social impacts. It's sort of just it breaks your brain a little bit. And then I'm seeing it play out in my day to day being it's not that I lack the vocabulary to describe to people what I'm going through. I can sit down and write it out long form and edit it and
Sure.
come up with an elevator pitch for it. But it's people's brains aren't optimized to hear it.
So here's my question.
And that's just that's where I'm at with all this of just I'm,
right. No.
If you think about it, quitting smoking, I'm in the Nicorette gum phase of it right now. And I'm not totally on the other side of it, but I'm just man, we're not going to even start to understand the impacts here of maybe the reason we can't get to the what comes after let's start the conversation is because of the distribution method. We can't get to the next thing in mental health because we're still stuck on the platforms that don't allow for those deeper conversations to happen, or
100%.
I don't know, but it's just it's this weird thing I've been grappling with lately, and I think it helps answer the question of how are you that you asked me in the beginning.
How are you really? But here's my question. So there, someone had come to me and had approached me with an idea of coming up with a mom blog, right? And I was who has blogs anymore? Who reads these things? I certainly don't. What do you mean? I have my Instagram. And, I do all these Instagrams and I do all these reels and I do all these TikToks and everything. And it's nothing goes anywhere, right? It's not exploding the way that it could be. I have good content. I have good information. The podcast, the podcast is its own family. And then there's the family of social media, and they really don't interact that well together, Well,
that's because listening to a podcast while horny is much different than scrolling through Instagram while horny.
Words to live by. So, words to live by. But someone who was a guest on my show talked about how she always would write emails, subscription emails, and someone had come up with something called Substack, I think, and it's a company or it's an app or a website or something where, anyways, you write these blog posts, basically subscription newsletters. And I was God, that's such a great idea. I'd really love to do that because I feel there's so much information that I get every single day that I can't really share in a 30-second reel, right? And or I'll do it a TikTok and people will be nah, 5 people watched it and they're not into it, but it's I show a picture of my boobs, hence what you were saying, horny on Instagram, and that's where all the likes come. And I'm yeah, but I have such valuable information, specific mom information. I'm not talking about mental health podcasts. I'm talking about mom information of hey, this food works, or hey, this activity is great, or hey, this Montessori type based, or free play based, whatever it may be. I have all this information. But do you think that people are going to take that change and want to read long form letters? This is a question for you. This is a question for the audience right now. Is that something that's going to be
subscribe, write in the comments if you want a blog post.
But would you listen to that? Would you read that?
Yeah, but I'm a huge nerd. I read textbooks for fun.
But that's my audience. You're my fucking audience, dude. and I think for me, like if a
You're gonna
mom like
write like
had,
a blog post and
yeah,
there's gonna be like academic figures in it. And it's gonna be like figure 5, thirst trap of me. Like back to talking about the context for which Montessori schools are good for structured learning. Like, but I mean, like, it's gonna be a blend of the two. But like to come
yeah,
back to this, like really hammer it over the head, like the reels and stuff, like people want to consume is you. They don't want to consume your ideas right now. And that's not a
sure,
function of you. That's a function of the platform. Like you
sure,
don't have time or space when you make a reel to be like, oh, check out this Montessori school thing because, and then like fill in the blank on why the context matters or like
right? Because I
specifically who
couldn't.
this is for.
Yeah,
You can't. So like what you've seen is just like the internet has turned into Kim Kardashian's Instagram feed, not because that's what people want, but because that's what the feed optimizes for.
mm, right, right,
And
right.
then it makes people feel bad about themselves
God,
because
doesn't
like
it?
we're all like primitive monkeys just like scrolling through the internet being
Mm,
like, oh, I like that. No, I don't like that. And like if that's the only mode that you're consuming content in,
mm,
no wonder why academic things or things that matter don't get upvoted.
mm,
So like to you, like, like there's a physical time constraint. Like, is it worth your time to carve out more of your day and write a long blog? That's a question only you can answer. But I do think there's something here to changing the medium through which you deliver this information might be hugely impactful on how people are engaging with it. And like you
interesting.
might find a smaller audience, you might find a different audience. Like there's all the other factors here. But I think at the end of the day, there's something to this idea of how does the text box look or how long of a video can you record dictates what is important
Sure, sure, sure,
before we even talk about what we're making videos
sure,
or writing things about.
sure.
And I think that that's a conversation that when applied to being a mom, being a new parent, talking about your mental health, those things are much harder to do in those constraints.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that are easier to do are to sell bikinis. And just like we have to be able to call a spade a spade. And it's taken us 14, 15 years to get
Sure.
there on the internet.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a space for the stuff that you're doing, that we're doing, the conversations we're trying to have. I just don't know if it's reals or even if it should be. If it should be, you know what I
Maybe
mean?
it
Like
shouldn't be. Maybe I'm like
maybe
trying to
it
make it
shouldn't
think
be.
like I see a bunch
Square
of
peg,
moms doing
round
stuff
hole,
that,
man.
yeah, you never know, you know? Well,
It's
on
not you,
another
it's the
note,
internet.
it's not me, it's the internet. Exactly. I love that. But on another note, talking about our mental health and how we're feeling better, I talked about it a little bit on the podcast on how I had thought that I was finally feeling better and I was finally feeling like myself again. And when I say myself again, I will never be myself again because I'm
Yeah,
even
you'll never
different.
be that.
But I was feeling like I was feeling good. I was feeling that fire inside me again where I was like, I'm ready to take on the world. I'm ready to take on the business. I'm ready to, just be myself and be awesome, beyond just being this identity of a mom because I've lost who I am. And that's just the true honesty of it. I have
Mhm.
no idea who I am. That is an internal battle that I go through every single day. But I was starting to feel a little bit more like the older version of Alessandra that I love. That being said, an event happened. Someone almost hit me with their car while I was pushing Lady. It became a huge fight. The person was screaming at me like it was my fault. And the pedestrian, from everything I've read, pedestrians have the right of way, even though I was out in the middle of the street and I was not speeding in a residential area. But that is neither here nor there. Point is, I was completely debilitated. I could not breathe. I could not speak. I was hyperventilating. I was shaking. And I had gone right back to that postpartum anxiety that I had 10 days postpartum when I was hemorrhaging and I had no idea why, if I was going to live or not. And I had posted a video and a friend of mine, Carmeet, who was on the podcast before. She's amazing. She had reached out to me and she was like, this is what's happening. You're going to get neurofeedback. You can go to therapy. You can get CBT. You can do all these things. It's going to take time. Neurofeedback is going to be the quickest, most efficient way for you to nip this in the bud, because you cannot let this get any worse, because you're going to spiral. David, I've done, I would say, 7 or 8 neurofeedback therapies. And all I could think about was you during this experience. So the type of neurofeedback therapy that I've been doing is where they put the things on my head, right?
Electrodes, yeah.
Electrodes. And we have a conversation. And it's like not a big deal. It's not even therapy. It's like just a chat. I don't read I don't read anything. I don't look at a screen. It's very quick. It's 20 minutes. It's in and out. When I tell you, after the, I would say, second session, I was able to get back on my street, walk my baby without any fear, and without being debilitated. It was the craziest thing that's ever happened to me, with such an immediate result, where I was like, where has this been all my life? And then I remember, I do believe that you were giving yourself neurofeedback therapy.
We got to do a whole new podcast episode here now.
Okay. So we should save this.
Press pause.
Okay, part 2. Okay, we're going to leave this for part 2.